Hello and welcome to Mandibil. Welcome to my part 7, or the part 7 of my deconstruction of Stefan Molyneux's book, Essential Philosophy. How to know what on earth is going on. And last time we were dealing with the chapter Philosophy and Control. And I spent quite an amount of time explaining or deconstructing his 4 levels of control. And personally, I'm not very fond of the term control because that implies something controlling. So if you're saying there are 4 levels of control, so there are 4 levels of where you can control, and the 4th level you have 0 control. So there are 3 levels you can control and a 4th level that you can't control. So there's 0 level control could also mathematically be seen as a kind of control, right? But then what is doing the controlling, right? It's an obvious question but the mind is controlling itself. So the mind is controlling itself. How does that work? I don't know. I have done that kind of thinking myself, and I've come to the conclusion that the mind cannot control itself. Because what would that be? You are implicitly saying that there are 2 kinds of, maybe not 2 kinds of mind, but at least there's some part of mind that this is earmarked towards controlling the rest of mind. But if mind is that which controls mind, it makes no sense to say that, right? If mind is that which is controlled and also that which controls, it just feels like there's something there that is just stepped over and just saying everything is mind, right? Which is actually a fallacy of idealism, in my opinion. Or that's very close to when you get into idealism or an idealistic approach of metaphysics, you're going to end up in saying everything is mind, right? But what is that which is saying that everything is mind? And what about the internal, external, and not having access to that external or the things in themselves, as Kant would say, right? So this control unit, this pilot of your soul, or whatever, if you will use some flowery land, take me to the pilot, take me to the chamber, the Elton John, right? What is the control unit? And how does that function? If it's a part of mind, how can it control mind by itself being mind? And if it is itself mind, what is controlling that which is controlling, right? It's the same thing as who is watching the watchers, right? It's to have an analogy from real life. Yeah, there should be somebody controlling everybody so that nothing happens. But then who's controlling the controller, right? Well, nobody. They're stealing left and right. So what unit is controlling the control unit? Well, and then you get into an infinite regression. This is the problem of knowledge, right? The infinite regression of knowledge. It was pointed out by Socrates or Plato back in, what's it called? The Meno or the Theaetetus? I confused these two, right? One of these two, or maybe both, right? This problem is pointed out. If you have knowledge, you do not need to inquire into it, right? But if you do not have knowledge, you can't inquire into it because you don't have that step. You don't know how to get to knowledge because you need to have knowledge in order to get to that knowledge somehow, right? There's a built-in paradox in this, right? So this is sort of the foundational metaphysics of his book here, I would suppose, but I'm not completely sure. But there's a built-in paradox in it that he doesn't address. And we get down here. There's a sentence that you can think of an elephant in your mind. You cannot magically summon an elephant to appear in reality. Okay, so this is clearly a dualist approach, right? There's your mind and there's reality, right? So it's a dualist. It's based on, as I can see. And this, I mean, that's fine. I mean, I am kind of a dualist, idealist. I'm a skeptical idealist dualist. So I've said it, everything, and now no. And go watch my my video called Metaphysics Woo-Woo Without Idealism, Metaphysics Without Woo-Woo. It's called. That's a complicated title, right? Idealism, Metaphysics. No, it's wait. Hang on a second. It's called Metaphysics, Idealism Without Woo-Woo. I'm pretty certain. Well, I'm even in doubt now what I actually called it. I think I called it Metaphysics, Idealism Without Woo-Woo. That would be sensible to call it that, right? So you can think of an elephant. Okay, so thinking of an elephant is not the existence of an elephant. Okay, this is quite important because this is a notch into epistemology, right? You can think of an elephant, but that doesn't mean that it exists. So to turn this around a bit is like saying, okay, for something to exist, it has to be an experience. Huh? If it appears, what is called appearance in reality is what Hume would call the impression, right? While the elephant he's talking about here is the idea. What can be difficult to understand for the layperson who's not used to thinking around these lines is that, that's my idea of what is going on, right? That the concept is there in both cases, which is also possibly what Hume was referring to, that it's the same concept, but two different versions. The version that you can conjure at will, so to say, is not the impression, that's the idea. But it's the same idea you use, or the mind uses, to recognize the so-called real elephant, right? Which is based on sense data. But the sense data is not the elephant. The sense data is there for the mind to recognize elephant using the concept, right? So that's why we can access the concept without having the sense data. It's not like I can't think of an elephant because I don't have sense data to experience elephant, right? So we can say, yeah, you can think of elephant, because evolutionarily, I believe that this has been advantageous, right? If you're sitting in the tall grass and waiting for the gazelle to pass by so you can jump it, right? Or whatever, the rabbit, and then you hear the roar of a lion. You would be hard pressed to say that you have an impression of a lion just by the roar. The roar, the sound it makes, right? But you don't want to take the chance to get an impression or a recognition of a saber-toothed tiger, possibly, right? So you would prefer to run as fast as you can or as silently as you can in the opposite direction without having the recognition. But because the recognition would mean you were probably going to be eaten, right? You are an easy target for a saber-toothed tiger, right? So being able to circumvent experience, so to say, direct recognition, means that you're able to run away from a tiger you haven't experienced. Right? You have experienced the qualia of the sound of tiger, but you would be hard pressed to say that's a recognition of tiger. But it's sufficient for you to identify it as the concept tiger, and saying concept tiger is dangerous. I'm not even going to attempt a full recognition of tiger, right? I'm going in the opposite direction. So, and those who are saying, well, I don't have a sufficient number of sense data in order to recognize this as a tiger, I have to get closer to identify tiger. Well, then they are, tiger feed, right? And that would be weeded out in evolution, in my opinion, right? And I might mention that evolution is not a fact, because it's based on analysis of remnants rather than what it's not. You can't look somewhere and see evolution. Evolution is a mental gymnastic of some kind, right? So it can only ever be a theory, I suppose. I'm not even sure if theory is the right word. A conjecture, I'm not sure these terms, right? You need to feel, but let's call it a theory, right? I think that's what people call it, right? But it explains a lot, right? It explains a hell of a lot, right? And it keeps explaining things, right? Even when people try to get away from evolution, right? When you get back to evolution, well, things seem to fall in place, right? And there are holes in evolutionary. It's still being built, the evolutionary story of the theory story, right? And every time people find something new, they can fit it into evolution. So it's kind of stupid, in my opinion, to not go with that theory, because it's the only one that there is, right? And every other story about how things went on is something like somebody came down from the skies with 3 bones and clanked them together on an ostrich, and then it laid an egg, and from the egg came these kind of stories, right? Okay, so you get the point. You cannot alter physical laws, gravity, or the properties of atoms. No, but this is a different beast, right? Physical laws are something that are abstraction, a generalized abstraction of or explanation of how things work out or behave when certain circumstances is the case, right? It will describe how things will be placed at some point in time in the future if these conditions are in place and no new conditions arrive from that point of the now until that point in the future you describe. That's a physical law. It's a generalized abstraction of an abstract explanation of how things will behave if certain conditions are the case. You can alter these laws, of course, if they don't predict exactly what is going to happen at that point in time in the future. There's something wrong with the physical law, so it has to be altered, right? Whatever might be going on in that reality you're saying, you have no access to at all. So you can't say that they are cut in stone out there because you do not have access to it. The best you have is an approach called a physical law. There might even somebody invent something that is better than a physical law, the X law, whatever, right? Who knows? Gravity is also a description. It's not something that exists. You can point to gravity, right? You can see, well, these things, and this apple is moving this way from the point to A to point B, and that kind of movement, I am calling that gravity, right? That effect, let's say, right? But that's an interpretation of how things move, right? You can point to gravity. You can say, when things behave this way, I will call it gravity, right? These kinds of habitual thinking about science is quite dangerous, right? In the sense that people, because there's a physical law is something that is unchanging, right? I'm sick of this word law, right? It's not a law, right? And what are laws? Laws are something that some person has said, this is how it is, right? And then people are saying, oh yes, I'm going to, obey your law, or something like that, right? Newton became some kind of law, Newton's laws. Nobody even dared to question them until some weirdo in a Swiss patent office, who nobody really took serious, actually tried to do it, because there was an inherent contradiction or paradox in the law, right? Okay. Metaphysical differences. I'm not even sure what he refers to there, so I'm going to jump to the next one. Excuse me. Only you have direct physical control over your own body. Someone else can force you to do something, but they cannot directly control your body in the same way that you can. Oh, fine. Stealing a car. Well, stealing is an interpretation. That's a special law that you have created about what is going on. Stealing is not something you can observe, right? Unless you know that it's stealing. Well, how would you know it's stealing? Well, you're violating Hume's Isort gap, right? Your mind, which is really you. Okay, so my mind is me. All of the mind. Also that which controls my mind. So the mind is both a mind and a control of mind, or what? You see, these things are lost. He doesn't delve into this because it sounds like he's doing philosophy. But these things has to be settled. Otherwise, he's just throwing words around, right? I think this is an important one. Your mind, I'm going to read out. Your mind, which is really you, more or less. Oh yeah, that's this more or less, right? What the fuck is a more or less doing in your core philosophy about metaphysics, right? What the hell is a more or less doing, right? That is like saying this is bullshit. It's another term for bullshit, right? It's not only under your control, it is the very source of your control. So your mind is your source of control. And it's also that which controls the mind itself. I'm completely flabbergasted about what this control is, how that functions, right? Because if that control is everything, there are 4 levels of control, and control is your mind, and your mind is control, and what the hell are you talking about, right? Control that you exercise over your body and the objects in your vicinity that you can control. Okay, that was the contradiction with this one over here. The 4th level is where we have zero control, and this is where we find objective, empirical, uncontrollable reality. And over here he says, objects in your vicinity, that must be objects outside your body, right? That you can control. Now there are things you can control, objects, right? Objects, mind you, objects. Objective, empirical, uncontrollable reality. So either everything, including his body and his brain and his senses, are uncontrollable because that's reality, right? Or he's saying reality is that which is outside your body, which you can't control. If you can control things in your vicinity, what is vicinity? Is that a 5th level of control, or what? You see how fucking awful this is argued, right? He's just, brain farting onto the paper, right? He's in a stream of consciousness. He's just putting in that paper, without even double checking whether he's contradicting himself on these fundamental levels of metaphysics, right? Okay. If asked, you would surely say that stopping your toe was a negative event. Why? How do you know what I would say? Don't put words in my mouth, right? A negative event? What is a negative event? I mean, it's like he is talking about negative. He's talking about event and being surely say, you would surely say, it's almost like you better say that it's a negative event because I need it for my book, right? Immediately, your perspective, a bus careening off the road and crashes into the sidewalk just a few feet in front of you. Okay, so it means that because you stopped your toe, you didn't get to the point where you would have been, possibly been thrown over the bridge from the bus or so. So this bad situation is possibly a good situation. Okay, fine. But then you are telling me that a story about what is going on, a negative, a positive, a whatever event, is purely subjective. Any interpretation of what is going on has to be subjective, purely subjective, right? Even if you say you would surely feel that that's a negative, and you would surely, right? That's just imposing his story upon you. Be careful with that, right? He's actually saying here indirectly that any story about what is going on is purely subjective, right? And that would go for morality also, right? If you say that's a murder, well, that depends on whether or not, some, story that what's going on and what was going on before, what is going to happen in the next few minutes or something like that, right? It's very, very important. This is the story about what is going on. It is purely subjective, right? He's saying it implicitly. Okay. Or acceptance of objective reality. It's not you're bowing down to the laws and obeying objective reality, right? Don't listen to a philosopher saying that you have to accept something, right? It's the opposite of being a philosopher. Yeah, okay, I accept it because Stefan Molyneux says I have to accept objective reality, and he's telling me what it is because I'm too stupid to understand it myself, apparently, right? He's almost talking down to his reader, right? You just have to accept it or you can get a fucking bitch slap, right? Okay. The next chapter is called Radical Skepticism, and I might look it up on the internet what we might find there, and to get an idea what could be understood as a generalized understanding of what it is. And because I'm clearly a skeptic, right? And I'm in the camp that would say, well, you can't be a good philosopher without being a good skeptic. But a radical skeptic, it's like, okay, you can be skeptic, but now you're too skeptical, right? You're radical. That's radical. That is extremism, right? Oh, radical skepticism is this is from Wikipedia, right? Is the philosophical position that knowledge is most likely impossible. Okay, I would disagree with that. So I'm not a radical skeptic. Radical skeptics hold that doubt exists as to the veracity of every belief and that certainty is therefore never justified. No. Just because you have knowledge doesn't mean you have certainty, right? Okay, we possibly need to go into that later. To determine the extent to which it is possible to respond to radical skeptical challenges is the task of epistemology, or the theory of knowledge. Well, okay, so we are talking about knowledge. Well, skepticism is actually an attack on general beliefs of knowledge, right? Let me see. David Hume is mentioned in book 1 of the Treatise of Human Nature, in the chapter called, or the book called Of the Understanding. Okay, so as radical skepticism can be used as an objection for most or all beliefs, many philosophers have attempted to refute it. For example, Bertrand Russell wrote, "Skepticism, while logically impeccable, is psychologically impossible, and there is an element of frivolous insincerity in any philosophy which pretends to accept it." Well, yeah, okay. Let's see what goes on in Stefan Molyneux's book. Radical skepticism. Let me have a sip of my coffee. It is possible to construct a scenario wherein all the above divisions still remain within our mind. Perhaps we are just a brain in a tank, manipulated by a Cartesian demon who externally divides our mind and experience into the multiple categories defined above. If our mind exists in some sort of virtual reality, then there is no reason why this demon could not provide us stimuli we could change and stimuli we could not change. I don't understand this change thing, right? Because what is changing is your experience of what that might be that is going on. And if it's all experiences, if everything is experiences, right? What you call change is just another kind of interpretation of that experience. So if it's an experience, well, it's like your experience could be seen as you receiving the light from a torch, right? And you're philosophizing about this light, and it's a simple sort of analogy, right? you are philosophizing about that light. You're saying it must come from somewhere. There must be something that creates that light, right? But the problem is, all you receive is the light. So if we fabulate about what creates that light, we can never get to that torch. Even if I have a mental picture of that torch, right? I'm just calling it a torch and imagining a torch, right? Which is also a kind of, a reference to mind or experience or something, right? I call that which creates the light the torch. But because the only thing I receive is the light, I can never get to what I call the torch. You understand? Because you are disconnected from the things themselves. Because you only have the reflections at most, right? Light is a reflection. Sound is a reflection, or a bouncing of air in the between that object and you, right? And so it goes for everything else. Right? Even tastes, you are maybe not disconnected physically. You're touching the object, but it's still transformed into some signal, which is not the object, right? So nothing of your sense data is the object itself. So if the senses never were the thing itself, it can't be, because it's a sense, right? It has never understood what it is experiencing, right? The mind has never seen the torch. It has only gotten the light. So if I'm saying that the mind has created a world that functions in this external world it doesn't have access to, then what I'm referring to when I'm referring to the torch is potentially something that the mind has created itself as a placeholder for that which it can't access, right? And then the materialist or the physicist or Stefan Molyneux would say, well, I know about the torch because the mind tells me what it is. That's the point. What the mind tells you is not the thing itself. It is only a artificial construction called your reality that the mind has created without knowing what the hell it's doing, right? Because it can't know what it's doing. It's only basing it on senses and data. It doesn't know what it is doing, right? That's the key to knowledge. And you might say that, but well, you're just eliminating knowledge. No, I'm not. Because knowledge is a definition. It's not something you can access. You have to define what it is, right? Okay. In a video game, you can move your character around in an environment, but you typically cannot change the physics of that environment. However, both the movements, what you can change, and the physics, what you cannot change. But I'm changing, this is physics, right? My cup of coffee is over standing here, right? You can have a view, right? You can trust me, you can't see it now, right? But no, let's pretend, right? As if you were sitting here doing the same as me, right? You would agree that would be possibly possible. Okay. Am I not changing physics? Right? Isn't this physics? The cup is physics, right? It's made of atoms and so on, right? Energy and whatever forces and shit, right? Going on. I'm moving it over here. Am I not changing physics? If you're saying I'm not changing the laws of gravity, for instance, well, okay, I'm not, but I'm still. The laws of gravity is an abstraction. That's not physics. This is physics, right? And I'm moving it over here now. I'm changing physics, right? The physics of this table, or if I move the one part of the plate of the table here, or one leg, I am changing the physics of the table, right? So what are you saying with this, right? This is there's too much claim in this that you can't substantiate. The physics is not something you cannot change. You're doing it all the time. Either you're changing physics or you're changing your own position in that physics in order to interact with whatever object is there in physics, right? Okay. For instance, they have programmed it so you are unable to redesign we're still in the Cartesian demon. Redesign your environment. Only their decision results in an unchangeable environment as you play. To think, no, but it's not. The Cartesian daemon is a thought experiment. It's not an attempt at an explanation. It's an attempt at enlightening to you how far down you can go before you have your reduction base of your metaphysics, right? It's sort of the Cartesian doubt is about getting rid of anything that you are taking for granted, right? If you're taking something for granted, get it off, right? And then get down lower and remove everything, remove all the bad apples, so to say, right? To stay in the Cartesian metaphor, right? And then you actually have to take all the apples out of the basket, right? And say, okay, these are the 5 good apples I can work from the basics, from the reduction base. I can't go any lower than this without getting into woo-woo, right? That's where you stop. You say, this is how far I can go. I can't go lower than that. These things I can't explain with something deeper, because exactly I do not have access to anything deeper than this, right? Attempting to go deeper is woo level, right? You stay with that reduction base, and then you build from that reduction base and say, okay, I have this axiom, and I have this axiom, and this axiom, and this definition, and so on, right? And, all the way to the top, shining above everything is the moral principle, right? To stay in a flowery language. That's a great exercise to do, because what you're doing is getting rid of habitual thinking. It takes some discipline to do this, right? And Stefan Molyneux is going to fear that somebody's going to make him crazy, because his mommy and daddy were crazy, and people around him were crazy, or whatever in his childhood, right? So he has this, his antennas is out, and everybody claiming that there can be some subjective understanding of reality. Oh no, they're out to manipulate me and whatever, right? So he is not really able to go down to that level, I think, right? And it's a good exercise. I would encourage anybody to do it, right? Okay, but getting hung up on this kind of the Cartesian daemon is saying, well, your experiences, right? How would you know? As I did with the torch analogy before, right? Or metaphor, maybe. What's the difference between analogy and metaphor? Somebody explain, please. The analogy or the metaphor, right? That you receive the light from the torch, but because you are disconnected from what is going on there, you only have the light to judge whatever. So if you receive some light and your mind creates something around that light, the light source as something you call the torch. Well, that which you call the torch is your mind's representation of it. It's not the thing itself, because all you receive is the light. You see that? Okay. So how do you know what that torch is? The only reference you have to that torch is your mind's interpretation of what might be going on, right? And it's an experiential kind of interpretation. It's not the being of it, because you're disconnected from the being, the ontology. I think that ontology is, you can't get to what it means to exist, right? Because your experience of things is not what the things are in themselves, right? It makes no sense to equate these terms, because you're exactly an experience machine, and that's what you should cherish, right? Your experience machine has not been evolved in order to understand what might be beyond experience. No, it has been honed into a machine of experience that can get around in that realm you are blindfolded from, or you're disconnected from, right? So the experience must have been evolutionarily honed towards getting around in it, not understanding it, right? Just like with when you get the understanding there might be a tiger there, You're not interested in full understanding of that particular experience in the world. You're trying to get away from it. That's much more important to get away than to understand, right? To think of it another, if you are directing a production of Shakespeare's Hamlet, you are generating, no, but I might get back to this. What Stefan Molyneux is trying to attempt here possibly is that he's saying, well, there must be a torch, right? And that experience or that objectification my mind has created based on sense data is actually the thing itself, right? I'm experienced if I have it's like if you're sitting in a completely neutral room, sitting in a square, in a cube, a room that is cube, it doesn't matter, it's a square of some kind, or three-dimensional square, right? A cube of some kind, and you hear a sound as if, let's say, somebody's knocking on the wall, right? But if you have never understood before you were able to experience knocking on the door, how would you interpret that which you call knocking on the door? How would you? We have evolved from not having senses to having senses, right? So the first time there was something called the experience of knocking, you wouldn't call it knocking. You would just, what would you do, right? You would have an experience and then, okay, experience. What the hell I'm going to do with this? You wouldn't even be able to call it sound. You wouldn't know what it was, right? The mind is just there, whatever sound, okay, sound. What is that? How the hell would I know what to do with the sound? And that goes for, colors and taste and so on. The mind, if there's some reason to what is going on, the mind has to create that reason. The mind has to go from not having a fucking clue about anything to doing something with whatever it has got, right? And then it's creating this sort of what we call reality. And now, because it's so convincing, this three-dimensional seeming like an external world, that we are saying that is what is there. But it's still just inside our mind. It's a creation that the mind has created in order to get around it what it doesn't have access to. You see the point? And this is what I think Descartes is trying to point at. What is going on out there is nothing you have access to. But that doesn't mean that you can't use that which the mind has created as a reality for something. It is actually there precisely because it's useful, but it's only the usefulness of it that you have access to, or at least the usefulness and what is needed on a secondary level in order to give you that usefulness, right? I may not be necessary for me to understand about the moon, but in order for me to get everything that I need to experience, I also need to experience the moon, right? Okay, let's not get too far into that, right? But it's just a thought experiment. He's not trying to say that somebody is like this, oh no, there's a demon that's trying to manipulate me. And right, he's so fucking paranoid about this. People trying to manipulate. I can understand that. He grew up with a fucking crazy mother and an absent father. Who wouldn't go crazy after that, right? Living in fear of being fucking killed by a crazy person you can't get away from, that you're dependent on, and trying to manipulate you and, being, crazy, right? Of course he's focused on this. I understand that. But that doesn't mean that connecting the dots in your direction or your confirmation bias is going to be good philosophy, right? Okay, let's head on. I'm not interested in Hamlet. But you are not supposed to however, this is merely a convention of the theater. There is no absolute reason why you cannot monkey around with the text as much as you want. Shakespeare chose the words he put down, and convention encourages you to follow him, but there's nothing absolute in any those directions. this is one thing I don't like about his writing, right? He's jumping all over the place, right? So, okay, so Shakespeare, so you're taking out of the context and into a new context, and from that context you're pulled out into this new context. It's like you can't relax in reading his stuff. You are sort of being kicked around in a pinball machine, right? Right? And this is annoying because I feel that it's even if it's because he doesn't understand what he's doing, he doesn't understand how a reader will read this. He can't put himself in the situation of the reader. Well, then he is lacking some emotional aspect, and he's slightly narcissistic, right? It's sort of megalomania, narcissistic, something like that, right? Or he's doing it deliberately. Then he's a piece of garbage sophist, right? So however you want to explain this, either he's a bad philosopher or he's a sophist, right? So it doesn't bode well for his philosophy in general, so to say. Okay. Exercising the Cartesian demon. Can we escape this logical possibility of being nothing more than? But is it a logical possibility? I don't know if it is. Logic is based on what you experience and can induce, right? Induction and deduction, that's logic. You can, if it's a claim about that realm which you cannot access. The demon is a placeholder for the things themselves, as Kant would say. And as I tried to explain before, the contradiction or the paradox of experience versus the things themselves, right? Don't be so hung up on it's called a demon, right? You're being triggered. It's triggering you. Come down to, relax, please, right? While it is possible to examine any number of scenarios that could support a brain in a tank hypothesis, it is also fairly easy to push back against this proposal to the point where it topples right over. To begin, we must examine the standard of the null hypothesis. No. Oh, man. A null hypothesis is a claim about reality that is either or. Either it's the case or it's not the case, right? So if Einstein is claiming that space can bend light, right? He's saying, okay, this theory can be proven or disproven, right? In one statement, in one proposal, or whatever you want to call it, hypothesis, or right? It is okay. During an eclipse, if you look at a place in the sky where the eclipse will appear, you can map out the stars in that area, right? And when the eclipse is total in that same area, around the corona of the eclipsed sun, you will see the same stars, of course, because they haven't moved, or very little, right? And then you can adjust you can measure the distance of these stars from the center of this eclipse, and you will see that the stars are moving out, right? Because the light has been bent in the gravitational field of the sun, right? It takes something as large as the sun to see this bending of light, because there has to be a lot of gravity in order to bend light, apparently, right? Because these photons are so small or whatever, right? Okay, so, and that's what the same statement or theory is that which can prove or disprove, right? If it doesn't prove it, it actually disproves it, right? That's the null hypothesis, or a hypothesis that at the same time can nullify itself, because the thing that you're referring to should be the case is not the case, so it will nullify the theory. That's what you are doing. That has nothing to do with philosophy. That is science. But it sounds great, right? Oh my God, null hypothesis. Wow, this guy is so serious and important. He knows everything. I have to give him some money. Well, if you have a hypothesis that cannot possibly be disproved, then you have added nothing whatsoever to the sum of total knowledge. sum total of knowledge, truth, understanding, our perception, or to anything for that matter. Okay, sum total of knowledge. Well, there's no sum total of knowledge. What is that? Is there a big library of knowledge somewhere? You have to experience it. You just said that you have to experience things in order to know. If you didn't say it directly, you said it indirectly, right? So if you close your eyes and go to sleep or something like that, then you have no knowledge. Because you have to have sensory data, empirical data, in order to have knowledge, right? So you wake up and you start up your senses, so to say, and now you start to have knowledge. Well, your memories are not knowledge, right? Your inductions are not knowledge. Or that you can make a deduction is not knowledge either, right? Because there are no sense data. These are mental constructs. Okay. If I say that I have an invisible friend called Bob, and then steadfastly reject and refuse any standards or criteria by which the existence of Bob, no, but now you're trying to disprove that there is a demon. You are not understanding what Descartes was trying to point at. He's trying to point at that if all you have is your sense experience, right? Your empirical experience, let's call it that. Whatever it is that gives you that experience, you have no access to, right? That's all he's trying to say. You're missing the whole point if you're trying to disprove a demon, right? You're not getting the point of the mind, not the mind trick. That was not what's it called? No, I'm just missing a word there, right? But okay, another way of approaching this problem is to remember that anything that is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Okay, how do you know that? How did you prove that? You just know this. Okay, that's this law in the universe. Mind you, we are talking about metaphysics and the essentials of philosophy. He can't just bring in some law here that's anything that is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. How did he prove that? If he can at all prove it, right? Is it just an assertion about assertions? This is bad philosophy, right? This is not philosophy. It's just, I'm throwing shit at you and hope that it sticks. There is a kind of intellectual black hole that fools and trolls deploy. Okay, so now it's about people trying to manipulate you, right? You actually cannot argue your way out of this, right? You have to refer to people having some kind of weirdo mentality, desire to manipulate you, right? That might be the case, but that's not an argument against the Cartesian demon, right? They propose a ridiculous hypothesis and then deny all attempts to disprove it. I remember a young man once putting forward the thesis that the Soviet wall in Berlin was actually designed to keep Westerners out of the paradise of East Berlin. His mother and I railed against this hypothesis, but of course the goalpost kept moving and nothing could ever be established with any certainty. If we peered over the wall and saw a dingy dystopia, well, that was just a hallucination projected by the benevolent rulers of the communist paradise. When we pointed out to the young man that the machine guns were pointed inwards, he said this was just to make it look bad, so people would not break down the wall trying to break into the utopia, and so on. Arguing with fools is not always a completely useless exercise, but taken to extremes and applied consistently, all it produces among the intelligent is intellectual paralysis and self-destroying radical skepticism, which again is often the point. Remember, if a hypothesis cannot possibly be disproved, it cannot be irrefutably dismissed. Okay, I don't know, maybe my brain is not in the gear of trying to deconstruct these. If a hypothesis cannot possibly be disproved, it can be irrefutably dismissed. Remember, but why do I remember? Do I already know this? How did I get here? Is the same as this one over here. Anything that is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Is that the same? A hypothesis cannot possibly be disproved. It can be irrefutably dismissed. Where do you get this, right? You can't just, throw around rules as if they are sort of, right? That's not philosophy, right? This is just bitch slapping the reader into submission, right? The reason is that a truth proposition, but a proposition is something that can be true or false, right? A truth proposition, a proposition is about establishing knowledge, right? Or establishing objectivity, I would say, right? Based on knowledge. So, but a truth proposition is a violation of the understanding of what a proposition is. A proposition is a statement that can be true or false. So it can't be a truth proposition. It can be a true versus false, or true/false proposition, but that's inherent in the term proposition. So you don't need to say a truth proposition. You are violating actually the understanding of what a proposition is. Must be compared to something in order to find out whether it is true or not. Truth, it's like, where are we going? I mean, where are we going with this demon, right? I'm losing connection with what you're talking about. Can you be more precise in your language? You're just going all over the place, and this guy in East Berlin or whatever, right? Truth cannot be entirely self-referential. It cannot, but is that philosophy? It's just a claim. Self-referential. Otherwise, it cannot be the truth at all. Truth is a standard that we apply to propositions that reference something other than their own principles or arguments. But truth is not a principle or an argument. It's a standard. Truth is a standard. Oh, man. Oh. We apply to propositions. No, you don't apply them to the proposition. If you make a proposition, that's an elephant, right? That's a proposition. Is it true or false? Well, it depends on your experience. If you look in the same direction and say, that's an elephant, well, then we have objectivity about that elephant, right? Is truth a standard you apply to that proposition? False may be as equally a good kind of standard then, right? It's sort of, there's a weird understanding of this truth and propositions and arguments and standards, and it's like it's all in one big cauldron, and he just pulls them out and sticks them onto his text and say, see, I've mentioned truth and reference and proposition principles and arguments, and see, it sounds great, doesn't it? But what are you saying, right? It seems that every time the any kind of approach of a definition of truth comes around, it's a slightly different version of that definition, right? It's like if I went through all of your books, or whatever, how many books you have written that are decently philosophical, right? There's probably as many definitions of many different definitions of truth that's their definition of truth in your books, right? They are slightly different, all of them, right? So it loses itself in this word salad. I have no grasp of what you're trying to say. For instance, if I say there are 2 bananas on the table, is that a true statement? Well, that's not how you do it, right? If you say that's a banana, right? If I'm in the same place and have the same experience, I can give you a true or false. If you're calling me on the phone and saying there are 2 bananas on my table, well, then I can't say I don't know. I would say it's impossible for me to know, right? I don't know. That's the only decent answer I should give, is that I don't know whether or not there are 2 bananas. And the point is, I would also say that you can't, 2 is not a knowledge, right? There's banana and there's banana. You can point to banana and say, that's a banana. And then you can point to another banana and say, that's a banana. The 2-ness is something purely mental, right? Counting is a mental gymnastics, right? You're not experiencing 2 bananas. 2 bananas is an interpretation of reality, right? You are identifying the same concept in 2 different places at the same time, right? That's why you call it 2 bananas. But you are not experiencing 2 bananas. You experience banana, and then you're pointing in another direction and say, experience banana, right? Because they exist at the same time in 2 different places, you're saying 2 bananas, right? But the 2-ness is not knowledge. For instance, if I say there are 2 bananas on the table, is that a true statement? Well, if a pair of bananas is sitting on the table, then yes. If there is only 1 banana or no bananas or 3 mangoes and an elephant, then it is a false statement. No, but this is about, if you say there are 2 bananas, right? And I experience 1 banana, I can't say that your claim is true because I don't know what you experience. You could be lying, but I could have an incorrect experience, right? If you say there are 2 bananas, I'll say, okay, I can only see 1 banana. I don't know if you see 2 bananas, right? I can't say it's false because that would mean that you have perfect understanding of your experience and you can overrule the other person's experience and say, there's something wrong with you, right? This is a very problematic place of his philosophy. That's why it's going to say, well, when I experience something, it's objective. And if you disagree with me, there's something wrong with you, right? This is where people who approach something they call certainty, they are very problematic, right? It leaves no room for having any other experience than that which the authority says, this is objectivity, right? Very dangerous. Be aware. If you are not allowed to look at the table, is my statement true or false? It cannot be verified, so it doesn't matter. If I say that I dreamt about 2 bananas last night, however, there's no way to objectively, no, don't bring in dreams. I don't give a shit of your banana dreams, right? I'm just interested in what we experience in this situation. Personal, subjective statements are not a part of philosophy, and personal, subjectives are not a part of philosophy any more than they are part of science of math. What? Personal, subjective statements are not a part of philosophy. This is fucking important, right? Personal, subjective statement, but all statements are subjective or based on subjective experience. I have to have my experience in order to clarify whether or not your proposition is true or false. I have to have a fucking experience to compare to your proposition, right? I have to have something at least. And if it's not personal or subjective, what is it then? It's my experience, right? I mean, he's actually trying to diminish your personal experience as insignificant compared to his great objectivity. And if you're trying to use some kind of your own experience to refute or say, I'm not sure I experienced the same thing, there's something wrong with you, right? You are trying to destroy my certainty. This is fucking dangerous, right? That you could say people who are radical skeptics who say, well, the knowledge is impossible. There's only experiences and I'm a solipsist and nothing can be true and nothing can be known and nothing right. And that's a kind of a dangerous scenario to be in, because then they are going to claim anything they want as knowledge, because they want to destroy your base of insight, your subjective experience, in order for them to tell you what to do and what to experience. But Stefan Molyneux apparently going in completely opposite field or opposite camp is, well, I can access certainty, so thereby I can tell you how things are. It's actually the same thing, more or less, right? This is complete uncertainty Therefore, I'm going to tell you what the case is. And Stefan Molyneux is, I am absolute certainty. Therefore, I'm going to tell you how things are, right? It's the middle ground in here where we agree upon what is there and not, right? If you disagree with me, there's an elephant. I'm not going to fucking force you to participate in some event that, encompasses an elephant you do not experience, right? It would be fucking crazy. If I'm certain that these people should be treated this way. That's what the state does, right? Because it's this certainty shit. It's the good philosophy must be somewhere between extreme uncertainty and extreme certainty, right? They are both dangerous. It leaves no room for discussion or dealing or making agreements and so on, right? If people are completely uncertain, we can't agree on anything, right? And if this guy over here is completely certain, well, then it's just obey or be shot, right? So complete uncertainty and complete certainty are both camps. It's the same kind of extremism. What word should you use, right? Be careful, right? He's jumping from the fire pan into the fire, right? Because he's afraid of complete uncertainty. He has to go into complete certainty in order to refute complete uncertainty. If he leaves some uncertainty within a subjective realm, it's sort of, in his opinion, it grows like a cancer towards complete uncertainty. So he has to be in the camp of complete certainty, right? And that is as fucking dangerous as these complete uncertainty. I would even say I would rather have the complete uncertainty guys, because then I would be able to say, well, you are uncertain of everything. Then you can't be certain of anything, right? So you can't tell me anything. But the guy who's completely certain over here, he thinks that he can go order me around because he's certain, right? He's way more dangerous than the complete uncertainty radical skeptic, right? Just give it a thought, please, right? Certainty is a fucking dangerous idea. If I say that a coconut was spontaneously created and simultaneously destroyed on the far side of the Andromeda galaxy 12 million years ago, will you say that the statement is true? No, I would say, I don't know. I would say, I don't know. That's fine. Will you say that it is false? No. I would lean towards false, but you would have to be there 12 million years ago on the far side of the Andromeda galaxy in order to say that it's false, right? Just because you can't say it's true doesn't mean it's false. You would have to say, I don't know, and at the same time, I would think, I'm not sure I'm going to spend a significant amount of time with this guy anymore, right? Because it seems like he's crazy, right? Just because I can refute it by saying it's false doesn't mean I have to engage with the person, right? For the simple reason that matter cannot be created and destroyed, and coconuts generally don't exist in a vacuum. Well, now this certainty fallacy or this fetish for certainty is going to fucking destroy your philosophy and turn you into a sophist, right? No proof is possible, no disproof is necessary, and the statement has no relevance to anything in whatsoever. But that's not the same as knowledge or not, right? Okay, there are a huge problem in his philosophy, and that is going to pop out in his way of arguing henceforth, right? The problems I pointed out in his understanding of metaphysics is going to be smitten, or it will the way he argues, or I'm missing a word again, right? The way he presents his arguments is infected by bad metaphysics. That's why metaphysics is so fucking important, right? Because if you get that reduction base incorrect, you're never going to get home, right? You're never going to get anything that works, because it's corrupted at the foundation. And even if you get the foundation right, building from there doesn't mean that you will necessarily get to the right point, right? But if you start in the wrong place, you're surely going not to get home where you should go, right? But how would you know, right? That's the point of philosophy. How do you know that what you understand as correct philosophy is actually correct? You might have gone at a wrong turn somewhere and not even realized it, right? So this kind of idea of certainty and certainty about philosophy is very, very dangerous, because if you went, a wrong junction 5 steps back in your philosophy, you're on the wrong path, no matter what you do, right? I would also need to explain how I know the mysterious coconut in the first place. If I cannot explain how it was proved to me, how can I expect other people to believe me? An important standard in philosophy goes something like this: who cares? Who cares? Somebody might care, I don't know, but who cares? Oh man. That's on the level with more or less, right? If a proposition has no practical value or benefit, changes no particular behavior, or cannot be disproved, then we can definitely file it under the category of, well, who cares? No, I understand, maybe I understand where it's going, right? Who cares about the Andromeda galaxy 12 million years ago, right? Sure, I would say, I don't give a shit, right? I would say, I don't know about your proposition, and I don't give a shit, right? And I'm saying, okay, I'm not sure we will be friends anymore, because it sounds like you are spending your, hard-earned life on something that is completely useless, right? It's the who cares. Well, I guess there's something to it, right? But it's this loose kind of speak has nothing to do in essential philosophy, right? Who cares is completely subjective, right? He mentioned this personal, subjective statements are not a part of philosophy. And here he says, who cares? Well, a who is a subject, and caring is a subjective experience. So what the hell are you saying, right? Oh, man, right? He wants to have his cake and eat it too, right? It's absolutely freaking awful philosophy. Philosophy is like medicine. In general, doctors should study the most dangerous and prevalent diseases, since human desires for, they say his should is an opinion. Doctors should study the most, right? His opinion, okay, when he says something, it's apparently objective, because if it's his subjective statement, personal subjective statement, not philosophy, then what the hell is it doing? You're saying doctors should do this? Your opinion is a subjective statement. What the hell is it doing? Is there something called essential philosophy, right? It's this is it's a sickness to the core of this philosophy. He wants to refute anybody stating any subjective stuff, and then he wants to pull, inflict his own subjective statements on you, right? Sure, you could write a proposal for grant money in order to study the possibility that once every 1,000 years, someone may get dizzy from biting their thumbnail. But who cares? When evaluating a philosophical hypothesis, one essential question is, what behavior might change if people accept this viewpoint? Are you still talking about the Cartesian demon? I'm not sure if what are you trying to refute here? I'm not sure. It's like, okay, you pull out also, if a hypothesis cannot be possibly disproved, and everything that is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without. It's sort of, okay, it sounds, this proof is, in my opinion, from gathering what it's saying here, throwing words at you to make you think that, it sounds implausible that there is a demon. He's not actually making any rigid philosophical approach to it. He's just trying to get you away from that thinking. Don't think that, who cares, right? It's like, sort of, no, don't go there. Don't go down the yellow brick road, right? If I convince you that honesty is a virtue that would bring you love and happiness, then I certainly hope you would begin to tell the truth more often. But hoping and convincing and, I think you would bring you love and happiness. This are all, personal, subjective statements. How dare you, man, right? Stick to your fucking objectivity then, right? If you accept the argument that courage is necessary for virtue and virtue is necessary for happiness, then if you want happiness, presumably you will try to be more courageous. All subjective opinions. Who gives a shit, right? Who cares? I prefer victory to an argument that cannot be disproved can be dismissed. This is our first salvo against the idea that all reality is subjective. Okay. All reality is subjective. But hang on, right? Hang on. Yeah, now it's like, okay, somebody says over here, okay, you might want to look into subjectivity a little more than because you are actually spouting all of your subjective opinions, like who cares and doctors should do this or do that. That's your fucking subjective opinion, right? And then you're saying, okay, now it's like I have to fire salvo against the idea that all reality is subjective, right? Okay. So it's jumping from, okay, there's a little thing, and they're claiming that everything is subjective, right? So it's, he doesn't really have a full detailed grasp of what he's really doing, right? It's like who would write something like this to exorcising the Cartesian demon? It's like it's just throwing words at you and hoping that you are being convinced by it, right? It's sort of snake oil salesman speech kind of thing, right? Who cares? It's not an argument, right? It's not a freaking argument. Who cares? Right? And doctors should do this. I think, but subjective stance is something you can't. It's not philosophy, but in my philosophy, my book on essential philosophy, I'm going to present my opinion. Right? Get the fuck out of here, man. Right? Nobody should take this seriously. It's a deranged person who thinks he's brilliant, right? He doesn't know what he's talking about, right? The infinite simulation hypothesis. Why don't we take that in the next part? Well, this is a 1.25 hours, so I think this is a good place to end this part and say see you in the next one.